Welcome back, everybody. We have a great week ahead of us, one that we have been waiting for a while now. It is finally Combine Week. This is where we start to see a bunch of players either see their ascension up or down draft boards, and we start to see the rise of certain prospects that kind of come out of nowhere and surprise us all with their athleticism. We had a couple of big names last year, that being Matthew Golden and Bashal Tutin, and some other players who really solidified their place on night one or day two, a couple being Quinshawn Judkins and Amarian Hampton. So who are the players to watch this year? Well, I have a list of about 15 or so prospects that I think you need to be tuning into, watching, really keeping your eye on. It's not always about testing though either. I just want to put that out there. You want to see where some of these guys line up in terms of height and weight as well. It can be a decent indicator for draft capital and if they reach certain thresholds that teams have. So with that being said, let's dive right into a quick look of one of the most fun weeks of the entire offseason. Let's kick this thing off with the position that everybody loves the most, the wide receivers. And the first two guys I'll be keeping my eye on very closely is Makai Lemon and Casey Concepcion, the wide receiver from USC and Texas A&M. Both are in my top four position early on in the process, and not to spoil too much for a later video where I'm going to be ranking these guys post-draft, but I'm interested to see where both of these guys measure in at height and weight-wise. Makai Lemon is listed at 5'11", 195. I am not as concerned with him. I do think, though, the status on him can change a bit if he comes in at maybe 5'9" and less than 190, although that's probably unlikely to happen. We want to see his measurements be what they are on the website. Of course, that isn't always the case with teams. They tend to kind of lie at times and over-exaggerate the height or weight of certain players. He's also a bit of an outlier and a weird evaluation that is a bit harder to project than most into the NFL. He wins on a lot of contested catches situations, which is uncommon for guys his size. He's just honestly a dog is the best way to describe him. That kind of doesn't always translate to the NFL in the best way. So if he comes in a little shorter, a little lighter than people thought, I think it could turn some heads in ways that we probably don't want to. And maybe we don't see him go closer to the top 10 and maybe he drops closer to maybe the 20 range where, the wide receivers like JSN, Jordan Addison went a couple of years back. I'm going to reiterate a lot of the same points for Casey Concepcion that I did for Makai Lemon. He isn't viewed as a consensus top three guy among players like a lot of analysts out there, like Makai Lemon is. But from what I've seen on tape and from his analytics profile, it gives me all the confidence in the world that he is going to be in that conversation, a little bit longer, a little bit farther down in the process here. I love his ability after the catch. He beats up man coverage, good against zone, can beat you deep, intermediate, short. He has great speed, great short area quickness. I love literally just about everything about his game. I am a huge Casey Concepcion stan, a big fan of his. He is one of my favorite wide receivers in the class. However, I am aware of his shortcomings when it comes to his hands and the inconsistencies that can come up and it can pop up there from time to time. Like Lemon, though, I think his measurements are going to be a talking point, especially if he weighs in at less than 185 or maybe even closer to 180. I want him to stay at the 5'11 range that he's listed at right now. That stuff is important to me. I think he can win on the outside versus press, but a lot of teams like to put Concepcion in a bucket of, the slot only type of guys, kind of like Josh Downs, Jaden Reed in the past. If they don't hit those measurements, those requirements, I think that he can absolutely be put in that bucket, be stuffed in that bucket where we don't want him to be. I'm slightly worried about that. I am not going to lie to you guys at all. I'm a little bit scared to be so high on him, but these are just two players I will be checking out as the week goes along and see where they measure out at. Another pair of wide receivers to watch is Omar Cooper Jr. and Zachariah Branch. One of the two Indiana wide receivers, which is Omar Cooper, and Branch is a wide receiver out of Georgia that is a pretty hot name right now. I'm really going to be watching their testing metrics, though, more than anything. I want to see what Zachariah Branch weighs in at as well. Not more weighs in at, more probably what he measures in at height-wise. He's listed at 5'10". If he is a little smaller, though, I might be slightly concerned. If he's 5'10", though, like he says on the website, the likelihood of him going early round 2 or maybe even sneaking into round 1 is probably much higher, in my opinion, than I initially thought. I think they will probably both be freaky-ish in a lot of the testing metrics, assuming that they both test. I think they will probably impress in the 40 time, and maybe even hitting an elite 3 cone that is around the 6'5 to 6'7 range would be super nice box to check for them, especially for wide receivers, that play in the slot. Because if you can recall back in 2023, JSN didn't run his 40. Everyone assumed that he was super slow. They may have been right though, but he ended up doing the 3 cone drill. He put up a 6.57, which is one of the fastest of the last 5 to 10 years. This drill is super underrated and really signifies really elite short area quickness and change of directions if they can hit that threshold, and really is, bodes well for slot archetypes like Omar Cooper and Zachariah Branch may end up, playing in the NFL. I mentioned the 40-yard dash as something to watch with Cooper and Branch. I really, really don't care what a wide receiver runs unless it is outrageously slow, to be honest with you. I do think that 40 time matters, though, to NFL scouts and front offices in general because teams, we all know, they love speed. We have seen teams, I might add, reach on players because of their 40 times of four. Of course, John Ross is a famous one. Xavier Worthy, Matthew Golden Latcher comes to mind. I mean, those guys haven't really worked out too well, so that's exactly why I don't care too much about the 40 in general. If either of these two run blazing times, though, then I think that we could see their stock really, really rise in the coming weeks as we get closer to the NFL draft. One of them, maybe even both, sneaks into round one if we see a big run on wide receivers. Just two guys that I think you should be paying attention to and keeping your eye out for. The last wide receiver on here is one that I think people need to be watching and not. Keyword not overreacting to. And I really, really mean this, especially if he runs a slow 40. And the guy I am referring to directly is Elijah Surratt, the other Indiana wide receiver. It is pretty much consensus at this point that he is not the fastest guy in the world. And he probably won't test Austin this week if he decides to run. I don't know if he's going to, but I want to caution people on this. Please, 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 I beg you, especially on the guys who are fast as well. This goes for the opposite. Do not double count him for being slow, especially if he runs in the high 4.5s or maybe even in the 4.6s. We already knew he wasn't fast, and something that a lot of people tend to do is even while knowing this, they double count it and dock him even more than they already should. We will see you will see a lot of people out there call him undraftable, say they're out on Elijah Surratt because of his testing metrics. Unless he runs in like the 4.7s, I'm not going to be overreacting about this. I know you're going to hear a lot of overrated stuff about him, especially because he's a good analytical profile, and I think people might think that maybe they may be fooled by that, and they don't want to be fooled by that. Whatever else might be floating out there, I want you guys to just block out the noise this week. I know it's going to happen with Surratt, especially if he decides to test. It's not Elijah Surratt's game. His game is not based around speed. And I'm not saying his lack of speed doesn't matter. It definitely limits some of the things he can do on the field and makes his projection to the NFL a little bit tougher, especially he's being on the outside. He's not going to be able to push a lot of DBs vertically. Once again, I want to caution some people on the noise that they might hear out there. Don't get caught in it. It's completely fine to note his speed down as a weakness. Perfectly fine. Just don't double count it like a lot of people tend to do this time of year, just like they did last year with Xavier Worthy. We all knew Xavier Worthy was fast. We all knew he could probably going to run in the low 4.3s. He ended up breaking the record, and of course, he vaults up into the first round of the NFL draft. There's plenty to like about Elijah Surratt. 99% of it, though, will not show up at the combine and in the testing this week. So I just want to caution people, don't panic on Surratt, especially if you like him on tape and if you like his analytical profile. Moving on to the running back side of things, I'm going to be watching closely at one Jadarian Price, and I know what his 40 time will be and what his agility drills look like. With running backs, I care about the 40 time, and some of these drills I care about, just a little bit more than wide receivers. Wide receivers, I don't look at it as much, but running backs, I do. I want to see how athletic they are. And usually when top running backs in the class test well, they usually end up getting vaulted up draft boards, and that's why I care about this so much. I think a lot of people are assuming that Jadarian Price is fast. So once again, I don't want to double count it. It's kind of all over his tape. He has excellent burst. He has good wiggle for someone his size. Another guy I want to watch to see what he weighs in at. He looks a lot bigger than 210 in my opinion. He has like super giant quads for some reason. It's kind of like Saquon-ish, but however, we have seen a trend over the past couple of years with running backs who test well at the combine, and that correlating to higher draft capital. Of course, what comes to mind? Marion Hampton, he vaulted up into the first round. Quinshon Judkins, RJ Harvey, all tested well last year. Those two went into the second round. Quinshon Judkins in the early second round, and RJ Harvey was a surprise guy in the middle of the second round. All three killed the combine, and once again, they were either drafted in the second round or all the way up in the first. I'm not saying Jadarian Price will be in the first consideration. I think that's a little far fetched. He certainly has a lot of holes that in terms of his pass catching ability and the upside there. But I do think that he can elevate himself to the middle or the end of round two and be the second running back off the board with a good showing. Next up, we got two other running backs who I think are going to be in consideration for a lot of people for RB2 off the board. That is going to be Washington running back Jonah Coleman and Nebraska running back Emmett Johnson. I want to see their measurements, 40 time, agility drills, pretty much everything. For these two, I am much less confident in what their actual athleticism looks like. I really do like both of these guys as prospects. I will be honest, it's not the best running back class in the world, but I think these guys are really solid prospects. They are elusive. They make people miss. They break tackles. Most importantly, they catch passes. They're excellent receivers out of the backfield. The only question mark from the NFL is most likely what their testing looks like. I think that's going to be important. Emmett Johnson is the much smaller back of the two, and it will be interesting to see his weight and how fast he runs, especially if he comes at in or around the 200-pound range. Maybe he puts on a little weight. Maybe he drops a little weight to try to run a faster 40. I'm not too sure, but I think that's something to watch and something we will probably talk about post combine. As much as I could care less about a 4.55 40 and a 4.48 40, I don't really think there's much of a difference. The NFL is going to take that a lot into account, and I think if Emmett Johnson runs in the 4.4s anywhere in there, I do think he joins Jarian Price as a real candidate for RB2 off the board. As far as Jonah Coleman is concerned, I am worried a bit more. He will likely probably run in the 4.5s, mid to low 4.5s at the very best, in my opinion. Nobody thinks he's a Blazer at all. That is not his game. He is listed at 5'9", 228, like a straight bowling ball type build. I'm curious if he comes in a little bit lighter to try to run faster in the 40 if he decides to do that. Either way, I'm a little afraid that if he does run, people will double count once again his slower 40 and dock him for it. I think scouts and NFL teams know that he isn't a burner. I think they all know that. That still doesn't stop them from letting guys fall every year because of it. I think Scadaboo and Caleb Johnson last year, one didn't run because he probably knew he wasn't going to run fast. The NFL was going to dock him regardless. Caleb Johnson decided to run, and he clocked in at, I believe, the like 4.57 range. People freaked a bit. He fell to the late third of the NFL draft. I think there is a scenario where that happens to Jonah Coleman, and he dropped to late day 2 or early day 3 because of it. I don't think that's exactly a kill shot for him. I really like Jonah Coleman as a prospect. I think he's a great receiver out of the backfield for his size. Very unique prospect. It's just something to keep in mind, and one I want you guys to be watching very closely. I'm going to give some people 3 sleeper running backs or under the radar guys that could shoot up boards after a good combine. Probably the one I'm most excited about, Mike Washington Jr., running back out of Arkansas. Big dude. He's like 6'2", 228, rocked up, has super nice combo of speed and power. I think he can easily run in the 4.4s and place himself in the day 2 conversation. He already impressed a couple of weeks ago at the Senior Bowl, and I can see the rocket ship for him getting pretty out of control post-combine. I know a lot of the analysts have been talking about him out there as he's continued to rise as the process has been going along. I'm pretty confident that he will be a big riser consensusly after this weekend. Running back 2 that I want to talk about, Damon Claiborne, Wake Forest guy. This dude can absolutely scoot. He's listed at 5'10", 195, so a little lighter than some of the backs we have talked about, probably the lightest back that we have talked about so far. What excites me about Claiborne is, of course, some of the explosiveness he puts on tape, but this guy has a big track background. That gives me a lot of confidence that he will probably be in the 4.3s at the very least. He ran a 10.6 100-meter time in high school and was a Virginia State champion in the 100-meter. If that doesn't get you juiced up about a prospect going into the combine, I really don't know what else will. And the last sleeper I want to talk to you guys about is Jamari Taylor, running back out of the University of Virginia. Stocky frame, come in at 5'9", 204. This guy can absolutely move, though. Similar to Claiborne, not as fast as him, but haven't gotten to dive super deep into his tape. But I can say that he has a ton of juice and is someone who will shoot up draft boards with a good showing in the drills this weekend. He's got a lot of similarities to Bashal Tutin, in my opinion, from last year. And if he runs in the same range as him in the 40, he could probably find himself being selected early in the 4th round on day 3. Let's talk about some tight ends. I think the first guy we're all eager to see test is Kenyan Sadiq. Pretty much the consensus tight end 1, and the reason that he is perceived so is because of his athleticism. So let's see it on full display this week. I want to see Sadiq completely obliterate the combine. I want to see him run in the 4.4s. Shoot, honestly, I'd be good with anywhere in the 4.5s as well. I want to see a crazy vertical jump, broad jump. If he does the 3-cone or shuttle, let's see the short area quickness as well. I want to see it all. More just for dynasty and fantasy football sakes, it would be really nice to see him test super well. We didn't get to see Loveland or Warren test last season or Bowers the year before. So it would be nice to see some sick testing numbers from a tight end prospect like Sadiq, who needs a solid showing to keep himself in the first round consideration, in my opinion. More than anything, though, the combine probably matters the most at tight ends. These metrics matter the most. Athleticism is super important for tight ends and their projection to the NFL, and especially in fantasy football. Is definitely the big name at the position to watch, and I would be indeed watching very closely. Another name that I am intrigued to see test is Eli Stowers, tight end out of Vanderbilt. A little bit of a slimmer build, about around 6'4", 235. I haven't watched much tape on him at all. He is impressive, though, if you have seen him play. I saw him play against Texas. He absolutely ripped us to shreds. He was actually the winner of the Mackey Award, which goes to the best tight end in the country. A little fun insider info here. The last 8 winners of this award, want to guess? Stowers, Tyler Warren, Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, Kyle Pitts, Harrison Bryant, TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews. I mean, what a damn list. Seems like a solid hit rate for guys who have won that award. And I want to see Stowers run at least a 4.71 or better if he decides to run the 40. That seems to be the threshold that most, if not all, productive fantasy tight ends need to hit. I think Stowers fits into the mold of, a Harold Fannin Jr. or a Colston Loveland from last year. It's really just a big wide receiver who plays tight end kind of guy. I have no clue how good he is as a blocker. Honestly, early on, like I said, I haven't watched a ton of tape on him, but all early indications point to him being the tight end 2 or maybe even 1 off the board when the draft comes around. If Sadiq, somehow falls to round 2, or if maybe Stowers finds himself at the end of round 1, you kind of just never know at this time of year. We just need to see him reach a couple of these thresholds to be more certain on what type of prospect we are looking at with him. To end this off, I have 3 under the radar tight ends to look out for. Eli Raridon, tight end out of Notre Dame, Justin Joly, I believe is his name, NC State tight end, and Michael Trigg out of Baylor. These are all the guys I'm looking to clear the 40-time threshold and have good weeks at the combine. Raridon is like a massive, like 6'7", 252, and if he runs I can see him go on day 2 or early day 3. Notre Dame seems to turn out like a tight end every year of the year, and I think Raridon could be the next if all things go well. Justin Joly has been a bit of a riser in the past couple of months. I've seen a couple of guys talk about him. He's ranked actually 88th on PFF's big board and is also a bigger guy who is like around 263 at 6'3". A good showing from him could solidify his day 2 projection and see him in discussions as, for the tight end 2, tight end 3. Same thing, in my opinion, for Michael Trigg, who seems to be another popular name out there. More of the Stowers prototype, 6'4", 240. Looks like a freak on tape. He makes some ridiculous catches. Look out for him to shut boards if he lights up the combine, like I assume he will.